All right, thanks everybody for joining. We're going to get started here while people are still pulling in. If there's anybody else joining, we'll catch up with them. Thanks again for participating in today's event. My name is Scott Baldwin. I'm the community lead and product evangelist here at Product Board, and I run the Product Makers community. Before we get started, we will be recording today's session and we'll make it available on the Product Makers community within a few days. You can look for the recap topic that we post the event, and we also make these available within the "in case you missed it" section on our homepage as well. Today we'll be utilizing Q&A for questions and chat for chat. We won't be utilizing the raised hands feature within Zoom. So if you do have any things that you want to engage with Chad on, whether that be post-event conversation or questions, feel free to throw those in the Q&A. And anything maybe Chad is looking for on an interactive side during the session as well, you can ask through the chat panel. I'm really happy to have Chad join us today. This is a little bit different of an event for us, and one that I think I'm really looking forward to as far as the value it can add, I think, to our product work and our practices as product managers. Chad is a senior product manager and privacy counsel at Relyance AI, a former attorney. And if that's not enough, he also teaches a holistic style of yoga and meditation he calls elemental yoga, and also has a podcast called Spiritual But Not Ridiculous. I want to welcome Chad this morning and kick over things to him.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, it's good to be here, and I'm excited to offer this session. It's such an important, I think, especially today, it's such an important thing to be able to sort of to have more space in your life, more of a different relationship to time and all that. So these are some of the things we're going to get into today. So the session is going to be a little bit of a little bit of practice, and then a little bit of kind of weaving in some of the benefits and the ways that this can help you with product management in particular as we go through the practice today. So a little bit more about me. As Scott said, I've been a lawyer and an engineer, and I've been a yoga teacher for the past 10 years, and of course now I'm a product manager. And it's interesting to think back. When I was just starting out as a lawyer, I was extremely stressed out and had a terrible sort of time management approach, or no time management approach, and so that's when I discovered yoga, and that's when I kind of these practices that I'm going to share today started to interest me. And so it's been a kind of a symbiotic journey for me through my career. So yeah, I think in this day and age, especially with us as product managers, we can feel like we're so busy, and I think it reminds me actually of this kind of famous Zen proverb, which says that you should meditate for half an hour a day unless you're too busy. Then you should meditate for an hour a day. And so, the idea there is that that we have to get rid of this idea that we're too busy to do things that we'll take care of ourselves, but also things that will help us actually perform better in a sense. So that's kind of the theme for today, I think. And so these mindfulness techniques that I'll be sharing, they come from the yoga tradition. I think in a sense, all mindfulness techniques ultimately do come from yoga, whether it's through Buddhism or some other channel. But so these come from yoga, and I'm just curious because I feel like in the West we have such a kind of skewed perception of yoga. I'm curious for the folks that are here. Do you practice yoga? And maybe you want to share in the chat what you think yoga is, or how you think of yoga. Maybe you think it's a waste of time or something, but whatever you think or feel or know about yoga, I'd be happy to see that in the chat. Yeah, I think everyone's probably tried it, right? And I think in the West we primarily think of it as stretching, or like a series of poses you're doing that involve balancing or some kind of physical activity. But yeah, it's aligning of mind, body, and spirit. Great. That's a great definition. Yeah, it's a very broad set of practices that are all designed to help sort of integrate mind and body, and to move you into more of a holistic kind of state of being. So I just wanted to kind of start by saying, yoga is so much more than I think a lot of us think of it in the West. So before we get started, I just want to say a couple of things about sort of how to prepare for for this interactive session. So first of all, turn off all notifications, put your devices in do not disturb if you haven't already. And just make sure you're in a comfortable seat. You know, it can be in a chair as long as you are able to sort of sit up straight and do that without too much effort, you know. So you just want to be kind of comfortably sitting straight and tall. You can sit against the back of the chair if you need to, but just make sure you're not slouching or, you know, sort of sitting sideways or something like that. And yeah, so that'll help us, you know, as we use the breath in particular, that'll help us to make sure that there's kind of a open channel to move the breath and that kind of thing. And as we're doing any of these practices, don't worry so much about what your mind is doing during these practices. You know, it's, I think a misconception a lot of times with meditation is that the goal is to get to a point of no thoughts, you know, or no mind. And it's actually quite difficult. I mean, even people who have been meditating consistently for years and years, you know, that might be an occasional experience. So, you know, the mind is there to kind of, its role is to generate thoughts, right? So don't worry about what your mind is doing. It can be thinking, you know, and I'm sure maybe you're coming from, depending where you are in the world, you're coming from maybe just working or something that was involved, you know, heavily involving the mind. So just, you know, just kind of let it do its thing. It'll slowly settle down as we go. So just trust that will happen. And we're going to explore a couple different practices, because I think part of the idea actually in the yoga tradition is that there are so many practices because different practices will appeal to different folks, right? So I'm going to offer some options here, and the hope is that you'll, you know, one or more of these will resonate with you, and then you can take that practice and you can use it in your daily life, you know, on a regular basis in the mornings and the evenings, you know, and you can really use that practice. So that's part of why we're going to go through a couple of different things. Okay. So with all that out of the way, let's jump into a practice, and then we'll talk a little bit more about product management as we go. So once again, yeah, tall spine, just sitting comfortably. We're going to start with something called Bostriko Breath, which is a very short practice, about a minute. We're going to do this. And this is just a nice way to kind of, it's a nice palate cleanser. It's a nice way to kind of cleanse the lungs and just kind of help us to kind of drop into this practice. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our hands on our thighs, and we're going to sit tall and maybe even come a little bit forward from vertical, if that's comfortable for you. And then we're going to inhale through the nose all the way in a deep breath. And then we're going to exhale in 7 parts through the nose. Like that, okay? And so as you're exhaling through the nose, optionally, you can also be pumping the navel. So that's just kind of using the abdomen, the core muscles to help with that exhale, okay? Unless you've just eaten or something, then don't do that. But, and if you know, this may be cleansing the nostrils a little bit. So if you have some tissues nearby, if you need that, you know, I can't see you. So feel free to do what you need to do. But let's do this. So let's get started here. So sitting tall, hands on thighs. You can close your eyes for this one. And then inhaling deeply through the nose. And then exhaling in 7 parts through the nose. Going at your own pace. You don't have to follow mine. Inhaling very deeply. Last time, this is the last round. Okay, and then keep your eyes closed. Just sit back, take a deep breath, and then notice how you're feeling. Sort of notice any sensations in your body. We're starting to bring our awareness to our body, which is important to stay grounded and present. Okay, so that was just a minute. For some of these practices, as we go, we're going to be doing it for a couple of minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. And so I just want to say, in terms of the mind again, as we're doing some of these, the mind, as the time goes by, the mind may start to wonder, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this for so long? When are we going to stop doing this? That kind of thing. So just know that that's natural, and just trust that there's a point for us doing this for 3 or 4 minutes or whatever it is. It's not that long at the end of the day. Okay, so we're going to continue with a more sort of subtle breath practice, pranayama, and then I'm going to talk more about tying this back into your life and into your product management work. So this is called breath of light, and so this is a good practice for calming and centering us. And this one, we're going to be working with another 7 count, but this time we're going to be inhaling in 7 parts through the nose, and then exhaling in 1 long exhale through the nose. Okay, so it's kind of like this. I'm gonna snap my fingers in case you can't hear my breath. So it's like, and then at the top of the inhale, you're going to hold the breath for just a short while, as long as it's comfortable for you. And then exhale in 1 part through the nose, all the way out. Okay. And so inhaling in 7 parts through the nose, holding briefly, and then exhaling all the way out in 1 part. Okay. And you can your attention can just follow the breath. So let's begin inhaling in 7 parts. You can close your eyes here, just following the breath. Holding the breath for a little bit at the top, and then exhaling through the nose, 1 part. And continuing at your own pace. You may notice that the pace is a little faster when you're starting off, but then it may slow down as you continue through the practice. Make sure your shoulders are relaxed, your face is relaxed. Inhaling in 7 parts, exhaling in 1 part. Part of what we're doing here is helping us to sort of increase our lung capacity a little bit. We're really, really deepening the breath into the lungs here. Okay, and after this next round, just come back to breathing normally. Keep your eyes closed. And then just once again, noticing how you're feeling, noticing sort of where you are. Just maybe allowing yourself to be right here, right now, and have no thought of what's coming next. Just breathing, nothing more. And you can slowly open your eyes whenever you're ready. So hopefully we're starting to experience the power of using the breath for different purposes, you know, to help us to calm, to center, and to ground, and that kind of thing. So that's a lot of what we're doing today is just tapping into the power of the breath here. Very simple. And you know, as anybody who's practiced yoga for long enough knows, part of the benefit of these practices is that you start to identify less with your mind, right? I think most of us, you know, as we grow up in this society in any ways, we're kind of identified with our mind, which can create all kinds of secondary problems, right? So you might you know, you might think that the thoughts you're thinking, for example, are who you are, you know, but they're actually not, right? And so we start to slowly shift our identity from being identified with our mind, which is just one part of us, to identified with, you know, our whole selves, you know, our higher self, if you want to say that, or our consciousness, or whatever you want to call it. But, you know, we just start to recognize that the mind is a valuable tool that we can use, obviously, in our work, especially, but it's something we should, you know, sort of learn to have a healthy relationship with and to not be governed by, right? And so with these practices, we start to shift our identity from not being so identified with the mind, and then we start to tap into more of a sense of timelessness or spaciousness. You know, we start to shift our relationship to time, which is a huge asset in, you know, in product management, in the workplace, because then you start to, you know, to be able to drop more easily into deep focus time, which is a huge part of the PM's job, right? Is so often we're going from, you know, sort of managing Slack messages and putting out fires and emails and all these things. And then we need to all of a sudden transition into a time where we're working on like a requirements document, or, you know, needing to focus. And that can be hard sometimes. You may notice when you shift like that, there's this period where your mind is like, okay, I was just in very sort of like you know, ADD kind of like multitasking mode, and it's hard sometimes for the mind to shift out of that state. And so these practices can help you to more quickly make that shift, you know, and also more quickly to like stay in that state more easily, and in general, you know. And when you do that, that can enhance your creativity, and you can generate better ideas. You can think more clearly, you can see more clearly, and all of these things are immensely beneficial on, you know, in product management, and which is, you know, that role is obviously, it's left brain and right brain. There's a creativity component to it as well, right? I think that's why we all love it, right? So, okay, let's do another practice, and then we'll talk more about the tie-ins and the benefits here. So, I want to offer another pranayama practice. We're gonna bring in some mudras, and so this is where it's a little bit more of the traditional yoga, right? So in yoga, there's these mudras, which is basically just any configuration of the body, but typically they're the hands, right? So you've probably seen, like if you've seen a Buddhist statue, they're in Jnana Mudra, right, in some way. So mudras are powerful because they're connecting different energy channels in the body, and they can have very you know, very, very powerful benefits potentially. So we're going to work with this simple practice where we're going to use a couple mudras and the breath, just to experience the kind of bring in the extra benefit of the mudra. So I'm going to move back a little bit. So in this one, we're going to be working with this mudra, which is very simple. We're just going to form a sphere with our hands, kind of like that. And that'll be down, kind of resting in the lap to start. And then we're going to be as we inhale through the mouth, we're going to be bringing that up slowly. And then as it comes in front of the sort of chest, we're going to be turning into another mudra, the Kamala Mudra, which just means lotus flower. So we're forming a lotus flower with our hands, kind of splaying the fingers out and the edges of the palms touching. So that's here in front of the chest, in front of the heart. And then as we continue to inhale, we're going to be bringing the hands up and they're going to form kind of a flat surface in front of our face. And then we're going to lower, as we exhale through the nose, we're going to lower that out in front of us. Okay, so you'll find this movement is helping us to further center and balance and calm, but also this in particular is generating a sense of hope, you know, and I think if there's a time for hope, it's now, right? So this is another benefit of this one. So this is called Amritsa Pranayama. This is sort of working with this golden nectar that they talk about in yoga. So again, starting here, we're coming up, we're inhaling through the mouth. So we're kind of sipping the air in through the mouth. Like that. And we're bringing this up as we're inhaling. So it's all one fluid, continuous motion. And then exhaling through the nose as we lower the hands down like this. Okay. Is that clear enough? Any questions about that? Okay. All right, let's get started here. So we'll be here for about the same amount of time we did the last one. So tall spine, comfortable seat. Okay, closing the eyes, let's begin. And you can watch me if you need to, if you want to follow along with the mudras. And you're slowly lowering the hands out as you exhale through the nose. And this one, there's no holding the breath at the top. It's just one continuous breath cycle. In through the mouth and out through the nose. Just following the breath. Okay, and then after this round, you can let go of the mudras and just breathe normally. And just take a few breaths here and see if you can notice how that practice made you feel, if that resonated with you. Maybe anything that came up, or just anything that's interesting to notice, I guess. It's always the practice. Okay. And then if you want to just come back and open your eyes. Yeah. Hopefully everyone's doing well. Yeah, good question. So Scott asked, is there a reason that the breath was in via the mouth and then out through the nose? And there is, there's a lot of sort of physiological benefits to breathing in through the mouth. It's in terms of, the temperature of the air and the ways that the ways that like the nose is a little bit more, in terms of like the energetic benefits, the nose is a little bit more sort of calming. And so it's like you're kind of alternating between the mouth, which is a little bit more activating, and then the nose, which is calming. And so you're kind of getting this more dynamic effect from that. And there's other reasons. The mouth is like something that we, there's a lot of more moisture there. So it has this like sort of, it's a simultaneously heating, but also cooling because of the moisture, so there's a lot to it, but yeah, good question. Okay. So that was Amritsa Pranayama. And I thought we'd go into, thinking in particular about product management. I thought we'd go into a practice that was a little bit more directed at brain health and balancing the brain and that kind of thing. But, I wanted to say a little bit more about some of the benefits of a consistent meditation or yoga practice. Meditation is ultimately just a form of yoga too. It comes from the yoga tradition. So if you can find even just 5 or 10 minutes a day to do one of these things, it can be hugely beneficial because it's this cumulative effect we get over the course of time, right? So I recommend that if you can find the time. Like I said at the top, if you feel like you don't have time, it's probably not true. And I think making the time will produce benefits that are more than worth the time you're taking. So it's just initially it's a matter of sort of faith that that's going to be the case. And then very quickly you start to realize the benefits and you see that playing out in your daily life. So and so with the consistent practice, one of the benefits you get, and these are things that are talked about in yoga, like in some of these famous yoga texts, like the Bhagavad Gita, you can foster this feeling that, no experience in life is too big for you to handle. And I think that kind of, feeling inside, you can take that and that can be almost like a superpower that you bring into your work, so it's this ability to sort of take on, a big, workload or whatever it is without feeling like it's going to overwhelm you. It's more of a internal stability, right? And you're starting to cultivate this, what we talk about in yoga, which is this state of non-attachment. And what does that mean? Well, it just means that you're out there in the world, you're at work, you're doing things, you have desires to do a good job, you have a desire to, to create a great product, you have a desire to further your career, but the outcome is something that you're not attached to, right? So you're doing your best job, you're doing the best you can, you're trying hard, but then you're not attached to the outcome. And I think these practices can help with that too. I think we can start to live, passionately driving towards the goals, but then we're not attached exactly to how the outcome is. That's a huge kind of lesson that comes out of the yoga practice as well. And that can be a huge power in your work, And I think other benefits we start to experience with these practices is that we might have more patience or compassion, and these are things, all the things I'm talking about are qualities of a product leader, right? Really. It's somebody who's patient, somebody who's unshakable, somebody who is leading by example. And this can all come out of these practices as well. Okay. So let's try another practice. This one uses these very very simple mantras. And I don't know, if anybody's sort of averse to mantra. Hopefully this is okay. It's just a very, simple thing. It's nothing, nothing crazy. But I think the benefit of mantra is that it's the most effective component of the yoga practice for working with the mind, and it works with, it's kind of working with like what we talk about with quantum physics, which is that everything ultimately is a vibration. So mantra is a vibration that is occurring, and can occur simply at the level of thought. And so that can be something that is very effective with working with the mind in different ways. And so we're going to do a practice here that is called the brain bija. And what that means is that it's a practice that's good for brain health. And this is something that we can all benefit from, right? Especially in our crazy jobs. So so in this one, we're going to be sitting there. It's more of a meditative practice. So we're going to sit comfortably in our chair. You can lean back. And we're going to be doing a visualization here. And so the visualization is we're going to start by imagining a point in the frontal lobe. So in the front of the brain, there's a point. And then we're going to shift to a point kind of in the middle of the left hemisphere in the brain. And then we're going to go over to the right side and then back to the front. And so we're, in our mind's eye, we're imagining this kind of triangle that goes from the front of the brain to the left hemisphere to the right. Okay. And so as we start in the front, we're going to be thinking this mantra as a thought. So we're not going to be saying it out loud. I'll say it a few times just so you can hear it, but I'm putting it in the chat. Okay. So we're going to be sort of doing the mantra, I'm in the front, and then Shrim on the left hemisphere, and then Klim on the right hemisphere. Okay. So it may sound a little strange, but just trust me, bear with me. You'll probably notice the benefits right away, hopefully. So, and you may notice, as you're doing this, you may notice that one side of the brain feels different than the other side. Like a lot of times in the beginning, one side feels a little bit more like bigger or smaller or something. So just observe all that. And yeah, so you can close your eyes and we'll just do the mantra in the 3 parts of the brain forming that triangle. Okay, so I'll do the first couple rounds. I'll say it out loud as you're saying it internally as a thought, and then we'll go silent from there. Okay, so starting in the front. I'm Shrim Klim. Back to the front. I'm left Shrim right Klim. I'm Shrim Klim. Okay, so keep going, just silently to yourself as a thought, keeping the visualization going. Okay, and you can slowly let the mantra fade and just keep sitting there with your eyes closed. It's good to sit for a little bit afterwards just to transition out of it and to kind of experience some of the benefits. But you can open your eyes whenever you're ready. And yeah, if you want to share anything about that practice, any reactions or how you're feeling, feel free. But we'll do one more, and then we'll close the session with a little bit of Q&A if you want to talk about anything, or if you want to ask any questions. But yeah, before we finish too, I just want to say, like, to kind of summarize here, I think, and the inspiration behind the title of this talk too, is that your life and your products ultimately reflect your internal state, I think, to some extent, and also the questions you're asking, and I think as you start to shift into hopefully more of a healthy relationship with time and with with your own sort of awareness in your mind, that you start to ask better questions, and you start to sort of think more holistically. And I think these can only benefit you in product management. And also, I think as you start to shift your perspective from being like at the mercy of everything that's coming at you, all the messages, all the requests, all the questions, you start to shift to a place of like, you're the master of your life, you're the master of your job, and not in an egotistical or arrogant or violent way, but just in a way that's sort of humble, but also very powerful too. So you start to master your life, you start to master your work, and you start to be, again, more of a natural product leader as a result. So you start to feel like you start to be able to be extremely productive consistently without feeling like you're running on fumes all the time. That's part of the idea here, right? And I think that's possible. In my experience, I'm here to tell you that's absolutely possible. So these are the benefits in my experience. Okay, let's do one more short practice. This is just breath. So we're going back to the basics here. And this one, this is a pranayama where we're going to be, once again, inhaling through the mouth and then exhaling through the nose. Okay, so in this one, as we inhale through the mouth, we're going to be gazing up ever so slightly. So it's not like you're dropping the head back. You're just gazing up very slightly. And then as you exhale through the nose, we're going to lower our chin almost all the way to the chest. So your neck becomes long, but you want to keep the chin kind of moving upwards. So you're maintaining the length in the spine. And you're just finishing the exhale with your chin down towards your chest. And then you're going to inhale through the mouth again, and then lift the face back towards the sky, or back towards, just slight gaze upwards, not looking up, but just a slight gaze upwards. Okay, so it's kind of back and forth between these two things. In through the mouth. You can hold the breath briefly at the top of the inhale, and then exhale through the nose, lowering the chin. If you're a yogi, this is called Jalandhara Bandha, this chin towards the chest. Okay. But yeah, so just doing this for a couple minutes is very simple. So eyes are closed, just following the breath as always. Okay. Inhaling through the mouth. Holding the breath briefly. And then exhaling through the nose, lowering the chin towards the chest. The spine stays tall when you're doing that, so you're not rounding, you're just lowering the chin. Inhaling through the mouth. Continuing at your own pace. Out through the nose. your attention is just following the breath. Okay, and then after this round, you can come back to breathing normally and just sit quietly for a few breaths. And see if you can notice the difference between when we started the session and now. And maybe you feel a little bit calmer, more focused, more centered, more able to deal with whatever's coming at you for the rest of the day. So that's the end of the session. I'll say a few things at the end just to say goodbye. But first, I wanted to open it up to questions. If anybody wants to ask anything or share anything, feel free to ask a question in the Q&A panel.
Oh, thank you, Chad. That was really interesting experience. I'm going to kick things off just in case that we don't get any questions. But I guess I'm curious for you and your workspace and sort of being a product manager. What came first? Was it the practice or the product, or was it the product and then the practice? Because I guess I don't imagine some people, I guess these yoga traditions and activities can be a bit of a reaction to the stress. Maybe it's just sought out things, or whether you had a foundation in this and have essentially rather instead applied it to your work.
Yeah, it was it came out of my experience as a lawyer. So I was very stressed out as a lawyer, and I was desperately looking for something to help me. And so I came upon yoga. I was in San Francisco, and I stumbled across this Bikram studio called Funky Door Yoga, and it was life-changing, really. Right away, I understood, this is a nice way to balance. And so it started during my years as a lawyer, and then so when I transitioned to product management, I took it with me, and I took some time off between being a lawyer and being a PM. So that's when I went into India and studied all these things, and really went deep with this stuff. Yeah, so
that's great. That's a good story to share.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess Victoria, Michelle, any questions that you might have on that side? If you want to throw anything in the Q&A or even in the chat, if it's easier today, we're happy to stick around for a few minutes and answer those questions.
Yeah, or not.
Yeah, that's okay too.
And hopefully this helps you, and as you go into your day and or evening, I guess, if you're in Denmark. Here we go. Victoria has a couple questions.
All right.
Yeah. Oh, how did I get into product? So I got into product because I was working as a lawyer, as a product counsel. You may have heard of this role. It's sort of like the PM counterpart in the legal department. So it's product counsel's job is to partner with the PM, and to make sure that everything that the company's releasing is legal, basically, or minimizes legal risk. And so I was doing that at Twitter back in the early days, and I saw, I was an engineer first, and so I was kind of already wanting to get back to a closer relationship to the technology, and I saw my PM clients internally, their jobs seemed so fun and so cool, and I just thought, that's where I want to be, is the PM role, So I continued to be product counsel at Google, and Airbnb before I finally made the transition. And so I had the good experience of working with PMs in those very PM kind of focused cultures. I think, Google played a large role in kind of like fostering that role. And then they kind of took that to Twitter, and then, Airbnb obviously is famous for other reasons in the PM culture. So yeah, I was lucky to be exposed to PMs in my lawyer career. And yeah, I'm glad to hear that the techniques helped. Yeah, keep doing this stuff, even one of these things. Oh, is there a time of day when these are more beneficial? Great question. My personal practice is that I do about a half an hour meditation in the morning, the first thing I do when I wake up. And I think that's important. Like, it's important to have some ritual, some, mindfulness thing in the morning, because if the first thing you're doing when you wake up is grabbing your phone and checking your email or your Slack or whatever, that's going to set the tone for the day, right? And then you're going to be in that mode. So I think it's important to have a little bit of a thing in the morning. A good discipline to have is to set the alarm half an hour earlier than you normally would, if that's possible. And then, yeah, do that in the morning. You don't have to do half an hour. You can do 5 or 10 minutes in the morning. Totally. Don't try to overdo it. It's like if you just start running for the first time, don't try to run, 10 miles. Try to run a mile. And yeah, so the mornings are important. And then I think for me personally, I think evening is equally important. You can do it, before bed, and that's a good way to transition into that mode too. Famously, David Lynch, if you're a film fan, David Lynch is a huge proponent of meditation, and he does it twice a day. He's been doing it for like 40 years, twice a day. He does it in the morning and then in the afternoon. So it's hard in the afternoon because, it breaks up your work day. But if you can find 5 or 10 minutes in the afternoon, that can be a good way to kind of reset, as you're going through kind of a hectic day. Yeah, good question.
Excellent. I think that's pretty much it, I guess, for the moment. I'm going to wrap up with a couple things, if you don't mind, Chad. And again, thank you very much for the, I guess, a little bit different of a session for us, which is good. And I think, to be honest, I think one that more PMs probably need to get some benefit from. So I really, again, super appreciate the involvement on that side.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, just to wrap up a couple things, I guess, overall, for those that are attending, we invite you to share your thoughts in our post-event survey. You can fill out the survey, and we do give away some little prizes monthly on that side, which is kind of fun. You can also continue the discussion. Chad is in the community. CHD, I think, is your username, if I remember correctly. So feel free to post any questions or topics or things that you want to know about on that side. And then we've got a number of different speakers coming up. Next week, we've got Joe speaking on building the learning muscle in your product team. We've got Rachel, Sam, and Sam speaking on the 17th with us on navigating your career in product. We've got Jeremy and Chris speaking with us on the 24th on sort of the work that they did on building our amplitude and product board integration, which will be an interesting behind the scenes look into the, I guess, the struggles and the challenges and the trade-offs that product managers have to make sometimes in building integrations of these types, and particularly how they work together as partners. And then last, we've got an event scheduled and up right now too for starting some of the stuff that we have in April, with first one kicking off with Ian Ames, who's doing a session on product prioritization as a triage, bringing in some of his prior health experience and work in search and rescue. Lots of other ways and you can get involved in the community, whether that's participating in our roundtables, joining and meeting people one-on-one in our Meet a Maker program. And also you can participate as well as a speaker. If you've got something to share, much like Chad did, and leaning in here, feel free to let us know. We'd love to have you and get your participation on that side. With that, thank you very much again, everybody, for joining, and Chad for the session today. I'm definitely feeling revitalized. I'm gonna have to take this into my very busy schedule today. I'm looking forward to having this little bit of extra boost and energy. So again, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, no problem.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.